At Bilinguistics, we receive questions all the time from speech pathologists and parents and teachers wondering if the way that a bilingual child is speaking, the language that they're using, is different because it's influenced from their home language or if they're really having difficulty. Today, I'm going to show you a new world language library that we are using to rapidly identify language processes in children's home languages and identifying whether the differences that the child's demonstrating in the classroom and at home are due to the influence of the language or something we should be focused on. We'll talk about it a little bit, and then I'm going to rapidly show you how we can address different languages and different problems in different languages, and I'm going to do 4 in less than 2 minutes. So here's what it looks like. A teacher says something, or we've done a test and we have a language sample. And we're looking at the language sample, and there's just some things that don't look right. So of all the things that look right or don't look right and we're not sure about, how do we know if the home language is influencing this stuff? Well, we need information about the language. I'm going to talk about Spanish here because it's a language that most of us are familiar with to kind of get the idea, and then we'll dive into some other intriguing languages. So as an example, word order. Let's say a child reverses the nouns and the adjectives. This wouldn't be something that we're too concerned about because it's a different process in Spanish. They would put the adjective after the noun, whereas we would put the adjective before the noun. So if a Spanish-speaking child is doing this, we can feel comfortable looking at it or seeing how Spanish is influencing this. This is something we would consider like a green error, or error is not even the proper word. It's more like a process. So not something we would actually want to focus on. Here's another one, pronoun errors. Let's say a child who speaks Spanish is dropping the he's and the she's when they're speaking. Well, we know in Spanish that this is a process that's typical, that after you identify who the person is, Juan didn't feel good, instead of saying he stayed home, they could say just stayed home because we've established who he is. So is it an error in our eyes? Basically, yes, but it's a process that comes over from Spanish, so not something that we would want to focus on in special education. Conversely, if there's something that exists in both languages and the child isn't using it, this is something we want to be concerned about. So as a simple example, in English, we mark plural nouns by adding s or es, which is largely the same process in Spanish. So a Spanish child who's not able to say dogs or cats and only says like 1 dog, 2 dog, 3 dog, that's not something we would expect, and that's something we could focus on with speech and language therapy. If we have this information, going back to the English transcript, then we can look at all these different errors and know whether they're good and not something we were too concerned about or something we want to focus on. So for example, here, some bizarre word choices and non-specific language use. We don't like to see that, and here there's also a correction. We wouldn't expect this child to completely omit a verb and use sound effects instead of appropriate vocabulary. So if we had this information, we could correctly look at a language sample and say what is being influenced by the home language and what is not. Well, we've developed a world language library where we're trying to put all of this speech and language information in one place for all the languages with the children that we work with. And you can get there by going to bilinguistics.com/language. So let's do some other examples that aren't as typical as Spanish. So we hear this, my Thai-speaking child is saying words in a different order. So is this just because they're learning English, or are these language processes that I should be focusing on? So if a Thai-speaking child said the house blue, right? Would that be an issue? Well, let's go to the language library, and we're going to scroll down to Thai and click on Thai and come down to the language section, and we see that noun adjective order in Thai, whereas in English it's adjective noun order. So it's opposite. So a child who speaks Thai who says the house blue, we may not be as concerned about that. How about another one? Your Bengali speaking student is saying words in a different order. Is it just because they're learning English, or are these language processes I should be focusing on? Go back to the language library and click on Bengali, and we come here down to the language section, and we see Bengali has a subject, object, verb order, subject, object, verb order, adjective, noun order, just like English adjective, noun order. So in terms of a Bengali speaker, this is something that we would be concerned about, because what we're seeing in English, we'd also expect to see in Bengali. Hopefully you're seeing how important this information is to have on every language, because it's not just as though you can learn something about nouns and adjectives. It depends on the child, and it depends on the language they're speaking. How about Portuguese? My Portuguese speaking student is saying words in a different order. Would that be an issue? Well, same problem, right, that a teacher might be saying, but in this case it's like Thai, where they have a different noun and adjective order, so it's something we wouldn't be concerned about. And let's finish off with a language that many of us are seeing more and more commonly, but is not commonly seen throughout the world. So Khmer, spoken in Cambodia. My Khmer speaking student is repeating words. Again, is it because they're learning English? Or is this something we need to focus on? Cat, cat, or house, house. So again, we're going to go back to the language library. We're going to click on Khmer. And then if we come down here to the language portion, we see that plurals are marked by repeating words. So a child that repeats words that's a Khmer speaker, this wouldn't be something that we're as concerned about. So there you have it. With the World Language Library, we can take any of the things that we're finding in our speech language samples and look at these in terms of whether we'd expect these because the child speaks another language and those processes don't exist in English, or it's something we're concerned about because it's something that's shared with English and the child should probably have an easier time producing it.